lunch today, right? The benefit of that is you'll find you take advantage of busting another myth, what I like to call the lone creator myth. Now, actually the best way to explain the lone creator myth is this. Who invented the light bulb? Oh, I already got you with the Newton trick question, huh? Okay, so there's a lot of people who want to say Thomas Edison, but they're not going to, right? Or who painted the Sistine Chapel? Michelangelo? And 14 other people, right? And the interesting thing about Edison and the light bulb, I believe Edison's greatest invention wasn't even the light bulb. Right? I believe that Edison, well, and actually he was the 22nd person to invent the light bulb. That's a whole other tangent that is quite interesting. His patent for lights was actually called improvements in electric light because it was an improvement on somebody else's patent. Who was the team that talked about stealing ideas? Literally. Edison's greatest invention to me was a place called Menlo Park. If you've ever heard of Menlo Park, this was his workshop. This was an area that he had funded, and he invited lots of different people to come and collaborate with him. Right? The idea was they'd work on some of his projects, he'd work on some of their projects, they'd just have fun projects, right? But the idea was to build a team, like Thomas Edison and the Super Friends, right? Or whatever. They actually referred to themselves as the muckers, which is a great word because it sounds like a swear, but it's not. Right? The muckers. And the muckers because they were mucking about in each other's projects because they were always sort of collaborating. And they found out early on that the market responded better to believing that Edison was alone in his workshop working on 6,000 different filaments for the light bulb. That story, stories that we tell ourselves are true even if they're not true, that story resonated with the public better than the truth, which was that there was a whole team of people working and collaborating and crossing interactions. And it produced some of the greatest innovations during Edison's whole career came from the Menlo Park years. Right? To explain why this works, actually, I want to switch from Menlo Park and tell you about one of my favorite studies that's ever been done. And it was done on not Edison and the Muckers, but on Broadway shows. Right? Because it stands to reason. We know that collaboration, or as I like to say in the book, innovation is a team sport. Nobody here presented today about how they just did their thing alone. Innovation is a team sport, right? But we have to ask what makes for the perfect team, right? So two researchers, Brian Uzi and Jarrett Spiro, literally Uzi like the gun, it's unfortunate. I actually, when I interviewed for him, I had always called him Uzi, and he corrected me and literally said, no, Uzi like the gun. Sorry. So Brian Uzi and Jarrett Spiro studied 80 years of Broadway shows, 80 years of what I would think of as the senior leadership team of a Broadway show. There are 6 people for any show you've ever seen, even Hamilton, if you've seen it. Some of you are like me and you just keep listening to the soundtrack without actually seeing it. It's kind of even more depressing. So every Broadway show, there are 6 people on what we'd call the senior leadership team. You don't need to know what all of these positions are, like librettist or lyricist. You just need to know there's 6 of them. And the interesting thing about Broadway is it's a small world inside of a bigger world in that it's a community of people who work together on different projects. And sometimes they see each other in multiple different shows. They'll work on Cats, then they'll disband, and they'll come back for Cats 2. I hope there's never a Cats 2, actually. But they'll come back, and so every senior leadership team is a mix of old and new connections. And I think this is an important point because so often when we talk about teams, we jump right to this idea of, we need to have totally fresh ideas. We need to have a totally new team, or we jump to our comfort zone of, we'll just do it inside our little group. We take one or the other poles. And what Uzi and Spiro found was a little bit different. They studied the whole network of Broadway, and they assigned a range to how diverse the teams were in any given year. Right? So here's an example. So we'd have like they gave it a 5-point scale. So a 1, right here, would be everybody has worked together before, Cats to Cats 2, right? Everybody, same team. And a 5 would be totally new, nobody's met each other before, it's all brand new, I sat at a table with nobody I know, that's a 5, right? So you guys are a 1, and then there are other teams that are a 5. So, now, you know that I give trick questions, so do you think it was 1 that had the most successful years for Broadway? Do you think it was 5? What do you think? You think it was 3, maybe? You're all wrong. 2.6. And I asked Brian, and this is my embarrassing story of writing a book, I asked Brian, how do you have 0.6 of a person? And he responded, you read my study wrong, which was really depressing. And what he said was, we didn't study individual teams, we studied the whole network. He said the implication of our study isn't form a 2.6 team because The moment you form a 2.6 team and they start to work together, they will inevitably decline down to a 1. They'll start thinking alike, they'll start having the same ideas, they'll start knowing the same people, and then 4 or 5 of them will be unnecessary because they all think alike. So the lesson is actually that the best teams for creativity and innovation are temporary. So creativity is a team sport, but the best teams are temporary. They get together, they collaborate on a project for 18, 24 months, something like that, and then they disband back into the network of people. Now you see why I was so encouraged by today, right? Because what did we do? We saw teams, and most of the time they started out this way, but they needed help from other people, right? But we then presented these ideas, which is the next step towards building that network that'll let teams happen. And this is one of the big lessons. Creativity is a team sport, but the best teams are temporary. So your challenge, my challenge to you for today, I have 2 actually, this is the first one. My challenge for you is you're sitting with people that don't work in your department, don't work in your field, haven't worked on your projects. Figure out before you leave how you can help them. Find somebody that you can help and begin to be not an official member of that team yet, but begin to be a helper on whatever that project is and begin to benefit from sliding towards 2.6. Right? Begin to seek out people who you want working on your projects that aren't necessarily from your department because they'll have other ideas.